I'm Kathy with a K.
And I'm Kathy with a C.
And this is Killer Destinations.
Today's episode is about the Gilgo Beach murders, which occurred over a span of 17 years from 1993 to 2010. Now, the remains of 4 of these victims, Melissa Barthelemy, Maureen Brainerd Barnes, Megan Waterman, and Amberlynn Costello, were found in December of 2010 in close proximity, and these victims became known as the Gilgo Four. 6 additional sets of remains were located in March and April of 2011, several of which were later connected to earlier unsolved cases.
And Kath, what's interesting about this case, well, probably actually just interesting to the two of us.
Right. Nobody else in the universe.
Exactly. But although this has riveted the nation for more than 3 years, we've never actually done an episode about it. Instead, we did 3 bonus episodes. One was in 2023 when Rex Heuermann was unveiled as the killer, in 2024 when he was charged with 3 additional murders, and then again in April of this year, so just a couple months ago, when it was announced that 62-year-old Rex Heuermann had pleaded guilty. And Kath, in addition to pleading guilty to the 7 murders he was charged with, when he was in court in April, if you'll remember, he shocked the court when he admitted to murdering Karen Vergata in 1996. This is a woman he hadn't even been charged with.
So last Wednesday, now this is June 17th of 2026, Heuermann was sentenced to 3 consecutive terms of LWOP for the 4 remaining second-degree murder charges for Maureen, Jessica Taylor, Valerie Mack, and Sandra Castilla. Heuermann was given 4 terms of 25 years to life. The 7 sentences will run consecutively, so Rex Heuermann will never spend another day as a free man.
So the following is a compilation of our 3 bonus episodes that will give you all of the details of what finally brought down the Gilgo Beach killer. On July 12, 2023, Suffolk County, New York police announced the arrest of a suspect in a string of unsolved murders that happened at Gilgo Beach, which is located on the south shore of Long Island. 59-year-old Rex Heuermann was arrested for the murders of 3 women who disappeared in 2009 and 2010 and is suspected of killing as many as 7 other people. He was remanded without bail and entered a plea of not guilty through his attorney. According to the Suffolk County District Attorney, Heuermann was taken into custody the night before and was indicted on 1 count of first-degree murder and 1 count of second-degree murder for the killing of Melissa Barthelemy in 2009 and Megan Waterman and Amber Costello in 2010. Heuermann is also the prime suspect in the 2007 disappearance and death of Maureen Brainerd Barnes. According to a court document, although Heuermann has not been charged for Maureen's murder, he is the prime suspect in her death, and authorities expect to charge him soon. By Saturday, Heuermann was identified as a registered architect who has owned a New York City-based architecture and consulting firm since 1994. He is married with a daughter and stepson and lives in the same house he grew up in, just a few miles from Gilgo Beach, where most of the remains were found.
Let's go back to December 11th, 2010, which is when the search for a killer began. There were a total of 10 remains discovered, and 3 of these women are the subject of the current prosecution. And of course, like Kathy said, it's expected that the 4th will be added soon. According to information on the Suffolk County Police Commission website, on December 11th, 2010, Suffolk County Police Officer John Malia was searching Gilgo Beach on the south shore of Long Island with his canine partner Blue. Officer Malia was there as part of a continued effort to find a missing sex worker named Shannon Gilbert, who had been missing approximately 8 months. As it turned out, none of the remains were hers. Canine Blue located a set of remains that were eventually identified as belonging to 24-year-old Melissa Barthelemy, a sex worker who was last seen almost 18 months prior in July of 2009. According to an article in the Buffalo News by journalist T.J. Pignataro, written on January 28, 2011, Melissa grew up in Buffalo, and after graduating from beauty school, she moved to New York City with the dream of one day opening her own salon. It was not until after she went missing that her mother found out that Melissa turned to sex work when she realized how expensive it was to live in New York. She was told it would be fast, easy money. Kath, what happened with Melissa is that she talked daily to her sister, and at some point she stopped communicating and she stopped calling home. She was very communicative with her family. Her mother reported her missing and was told, you have to wait 48 hours. So call back in 48 hours and collect as much information as you can within that time. So Melissa's mom went to Melissa's sister and basically said, tell me everything you know. Melissa's mom couldn't get any information out of her daughter. She could tell that Melissa's sister was keeping a secret for her, but eventually she coughed up the fact that Melissa was exchanging sex for money, which shocked her mother. So when they called detectives back, they let them know these details. One of the things that was so awful, Kathy, about this case is that after they reported Melissa missing, Melissa's sister started getting telephone calls from Melissa's phone from a man saying horrible things about Melissa to her younger sister. Now, her younger sister at the time was only 16 years old.
I couldn't believe that when I saw that. Can you imagine how excited she would have been to see her sister's name on this phone after such a long time?
And then be confronted with this man saying very cruel things about her sister. I could not find any article that actually expressed the words that he used.
That's probably a good thing.
Honestly, it is.
Yeah.
But I know that he was being derogatory toward Melissa. I believe this person made 3 phone calls in July during the month that Melissa went missing, and then all the way up to nearly the end of August in 2009, the phone calls continued. So I believe there were a total of 6. Once Melissa's sister reported getting these phone calls, police began tracking Melissa's phone. Okay, Kath, another thing that was super interesting about Melissa is that her family was quoted as saying they don't believe in psychics, but they felt so desperate, so they consulted with a psychic who told them that Melissa was buried near water and there was a sign nearby with a G in it.
Honestly, knowing what we know now, it's a little more...
Right. Knowing what we know now, there's more weight to the prediction.
Exactly. But at the time, especially buried near water, and they're in Long Island, it's an island. It's surrounded by water. 2 days later, the Suffolk County Police Department continued to search in proximity to where Melissa's remains were uncovered. On that date, police found 3 additional sets of human remains within 1/4 mile of where they found Melissa's. These 3 additional sets were identified as those of 22-year-old Megan Waterman, 27-year-old Amber Costello, and 25-year-old Maureen Brainerd Barnes. Megan Waterman was from Scarborough, Maine, and had been missing for 6 months when her remains were found. According to Chow Lam and Emily C. Dooley with Newsday, Megan dropped out of high school and she was working in a deli when she met a boyfriend who convinced her to join the sex trade. She would regularly travel to Long Island from Maine to meet up with her customers in a specific motel. Now, Megan disappeared within a week of arriving. She had a 3-year-old daughter, and she would actually call home to check on her little girl 3 times a day. Megan was last seen leaving the motel by herself at 1:30 in the morning on the day she disappeared, which was June 6, 2010. Megan's brother and her best friend went to Long Island to look for her, but they didn't have any money. So they actually pawned several items that were really important to them, including a diamond ring, a car audio system, and gaming equipment to help pay for their trip to look for her.
So, Kath, what I read was that this boyfriend, who was also her pimp and convinced her to get into the life, would often stay at his own house in Brooklyn while she was working. The day after she goes missing, he's trying to get in touch with her and can't get in touch with her and calls her grandmother and said, "Have you seen Megan?" And grandma was like, "No, I haven't seen her." So when her brother and best friend found out she was missing, like you said, they kicked into action. I would sell my jewelry for you, just for the record.
I would sell my car for you.
Ooh.
Your jewelry is probably worth more.
The third victim, Amber Costello, was from North Carolina and lived in a home in Long Island. She lived with another woman and 2 men. One was supposedly a friend and one was supposedly a boyfriend. Both denied being her pimp. However, her boyfriend did admit to sharing in her funds. Amber struggled with heroin addiction and had recently completed a 28-day rehab before she moved to New York, where she relapsed. Amber advertised herself on Craigslist as a private dancer, and when she was meeting with a client, she had 3 rules. Clients had to come to her, pay her $200 an hour, and she only went as far as she wanted to. She actually entertained clients in her house, and either her boyfriend or her friend were in the next room in case anything went down. Amber was last seen on September 2nd, 2010, and as she left her home, her last words were, "If my sister calls, tell her I love her." When she went missing, Kath, her sister thought she was in a treatment program. Amber was actually not reported missing until after the Gilgo remains were found. According to journalist Michael Heuermann with Newsday, in an article dated June 12, 2011, Amber agreed to meet a guy in a parked car around the corner from her house. The reason she did so, which was obviously breaking her own rules, was because he agreed to pay her $450 for 2 hours or $1,500 if she spent the whole night with him. Kath, he made this offer on 2 conditions. Number 1, she bring nothing with her, including a phone. And number 2, she could not tell anybody where she was going.
It makes me sad to hear that because you know that she has somebody who's pushing her to do this. You know she has rules for a reason, but the money made her go against her rules for safety.
Yeah, well, she was in very deep heroin addiction.
Oh, that's right. You did say that. She needed to feed her habit.
Exactly. So one of the men she was living with said, "You shouldn't do this. You should at least bring your phone so you can call me in case something happens." And she said, "No, that's not what the customer wants." She wound up leaving her phone at home. But it was her roommate's phone, this man, who actually fielded the call from the John. So he was able to later give the police the phone number.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah. And Kath, Amber's younger sister was devastated when she submitted DNA and it came back as a hit for her sister. They held a funeral for her, and her sister Kimberly was quoted as saying, "Amber was very involved in church and had a lot of faith. She just fell short of her own beliefs." And in all the newspaper articles I read, that quote hit me, and it had such an impact on me because that's all of us.
Right. Every one of us could relate to that.
Yes.
The 4th victim, whose murder Heuermann has not been charged with but is expected to be soon, was Maureen Brainerd Barnes. She grew up in Groton, Connecticut, and had a young daughter and a young son with 2 different men. She was living in Norwich, Connecticut, and was introduced to sex work through a modeling job she got in Manhattan. On July 6, 2007, she traveled the 2.5 hours from her home to New York City to make some money. She posted an ad on Craigslist, and Kath, you were talking about Amber's conditions. One of Maureen's conditions was that she would only work within the 5 boroughs and go to hotels that had security cameras in the lobby. Maureen went missing on July 9, 2007. According to an article by Michael Heuermann in Newsday on June 12, 2011, her family suspected she was dead when she missed her brother's funeral, which was 2 years after the family last spoke to her and 1 year prior to her remains being identified. As we mentioned, the women deviated from their normal routines on the nights they disappeared. In Melissa's case, she began posting ads on Craigslist without telling her pimp. Megan deviated by not telling her boyfriend/pimp that she had another date that evening. She also had a rule of never getting into a customer's car. As we mentioned, Amber broke her own rule of never getting into a customer's car, and Kath, this was because she'd been beaten up before when she'd done it. Maureen deviated in 2 ways. 1, she got in a car, which she didn't do, and 2, she had a date outside of the 5 boroughs of New York City.
The cause of death of the 4 women was determined to be homicidal violence, and there was substantial evidence that the murders of all 4 women were related. In addition to other factors, the women were each placed in close proximity to one another, 22 to 33 feet from the edge of the parkway. All were petite females, approximately 22 to 27 years old. All 4 women also had contact shortly before their disappearances with a person using a burner phone, and 2 of the victims' cell phones were used by the killer after their deaths. Now, we talked about Melissa, but I saw it reported that Maureen's cell phone was also used. And Kath, I read and read and read a million articles, and I could not find anything explaining further about that.
Yeah, I didn't see anything
Yeah,
either.
we know the court records identify Melissa and Maureen as,
being the two.
Exactly. In addition, each of the 4 victims were found similarly positioned, bound in a similar fashion by either belts or tape, with 3 of the victims found wrapped in a burlap type material. Fast forward 10 years from the 2010 discovery of the remains along Gilgo Beach. In 2020, Suffolk County Police released photos of evidence they believed were related to the Gilgo Beach murders that had not been made public before. It was a black leather belt with the letters WH or HM that police believed may have been handled by the suspect because it did not belong to any of the victims. Now, it's been reported that police received phone calls about the item, but I didn't see in any press conference or any writing whether there was substantive information that had been provided.
In February 2022, Suffolk County Police Commissioner Rodney Harrington established a multi-agency task force that included the Suffolk County Police Department, the Suffolk County Sheriff's Department, the New York State Police, and the FBI. The hope was that the new task force could look at the murders with fresh eyes and new technology and bring the person or persons responsible for these crimes to justice. During a news conference the day of Heuermann's arrest, Suffolk County District Attorney Ray Tierney said Rex Heuermann was first considered to be a possible suspect in March 2022, just 6 weeks after the task force was put together.
Which is incredible.
Absolutely it was. A New York State investigator identified Heuermann in a database, and investigators were able to use the power of the grand jury, which included more than 300 subpoenas and search warrants, to collect evidence and tie Heuermann conclusively to the murders. Essentially, Kath, the case against Heuermann was built using cell phone data and credit card bills. From what we could tell by court documents, it looks like the sequence of events started with the fact that investigators were able to determine that each victim had cell phones that connected to a burner. It was either the last call on their phone or one of the last calls on their phone before they disappeared. Each of the victims had a different burner number, and police believed it was likely the owner of this burner was their killer. So, Kath, what I could glean from the records is that police basically issued search warrants for cell site towers and these burner phones. They wanted to see which cell phone towers were being pinged by these burner phones around the time of the calls that had been made to their cells. So investigators were able to narrow it down to 2 cell sites. One of them was in Midtown Manhattan. The other was on Long Island in a city called Massapequa. We were using court documents to understand how Heuermann was identified as a suspect. It's our understanding that once investigators knew the locations of the cell towers where the killer was using his different burner phones to call his victims, investigators took the next step. They needed to find every other cell phone number that pinged off these 2 same cell towers at the same dates and times as the killer. What I had taken from that is that they were hoping that the killer, while using a burner phone, had a personal or work phone on his person that would also be pinging off these same towers. Once they had a list of names attached to these cell numbers, the task force would try to further narrow down the list of possible suspects. Investigators took those names and started cross-referencing it with owners of a first-generation Chevy Avalanche. When Amber Costello went around the corner to meet this customer in his car, one of her neighbors actually saw the car drive by, and he saw it was actually a truck and saw Amber in the passenger seat. This truck that the witness saw was a first-generation Chevy Avalanche. Investigators took the names that they got from the cell towers and ran that information through the DMV to see if any of them happened to own a first-generation Chevy Avalanche. One of them did. And they came up with the name Rex Heuermann.
Once Rex Heuermann's name was identified, investigators did a deep dive. They issued search warrants to credit card companies, phone companies, internet providers, all this kind of stuff. And Kath, one of the things they found was a Tinder account. And they found it because he was paying for it with one of his credit cards. So they go into this Tinder account and they basically see that the account associated with Heuermann's credit card has a fake profile, fake email, and the contact phone number is a burner phone. It's a new burner phone. It's not a burner phone connected with one of the murder victims, but it's a burner. So they start looking at everything. They dig through his emails, they dig through this stuff. And what they find based on this email account is another email account. They wind up eventually finding 3 separate email accounts. They also find that he accessed the Tinder email account with his personal cell phone number.
It absolutely cracks me up that he went to this kind of planning to circumvent being tagged and then uses his own cell phone to go to this email account. Thank you for connecting it. We appreciate that.
And his cell phone was owned by his company. Through his personal cell phone history, they see he accessed this email and another email, I believe. The 3 email accounts that they find from him that are fictitious, like their fake profiles and whatnot, are all connected to burner phone numbers. And again, none of these burner phones are connected to the murder victims, but they are burner phones nonetheless.
But one of the things he did that was super helpful is from the email associated with this Tinder account, he sent selfies to potential matches on this account that showed a picture of him, so he can't deny that he wasn't the one associated with that account.
Okay, I totally forgot about that. But now that you say that, the picture that he sent just popped into my brain. And he looks like a nerdy accountant with a little bit of a beer belly, like might be wearing a pocket protector on the date. His photo that he sent looks so benign.
It does.
Investigators realize the interplay between Heuermann's personal cell phone and these fake email accounts. And according to court documents, when they analyzed the usage of all the devices and the accounts held by Heuermann, there appeared to be a clear pattern where he was using burner phones and junk email addresses to, number 1, contact sex workers and sex partners, number 2, to conduct extensive searches related to sex and prostitution, violent and sadistic child pornography, and number 3, seek online information about the authorities investigating the Gilgo Beach murders. When the task force members searched Heuermann's computer, his internet searches were outlined, or some of them actually were outlined in the, what was it?
The bail application.
Thank you, the bail application. And it was totally disgusting.
It's one of those times when I was really, really happy to have words redacted.
Oh, totally.
There are some things you can't unsee or unknow.
What they did is they redacted, like Kathy said, some of the words, but the ones that weren't redacted were so bad as far as what he was searching that I was thinking, like, what the heck did they redact?
Well, especially because of some of the words leading up to the redacted word.
Oh, yeah. It was clear that he was seeking violent child pornography.
Well, and honestly, most of the searches included like 10-year-old girl, 11-year-old girl.
It was gross.
But doesn't that take you back to the fact that all of these women found to date were very petite?
Very petite.
They were like 4'11", 95 pounds.
Yes, that was Melissa, 4'11", 95 pounds.
Well, and you could argue that that could be a prepubescent girl.
So disgusting. So they find all these searches, and they also find searches on the names of the victims, the status of the investigation, the task force, all this kind of stuff. So now we have a name connected to subversive behavior and somebody who falls within the cell tower parameter during each of the murders.
What do we have left? DNA evidence. During the initial examination of one of the victim's skeletal remains and materials discovered in the grave, the Suffolk County Crime Laboratory recovered a male hair from the bottom of the burlap the killer used to wrap her body. A total of 3 strands of female hair were found on 2 of the victims, either in the tape or the burlap used to wrap the bodies. Once Heuermann was identified as a suspect, task force members watched him and his family and got DNA samples from items that were thrown in the garbage. Specifically, Heuermann's DNA was retrieved from leftover crust in a pizza box that he threw in the trash. The male hair that had been discovered with one of the victims was a match to Heuermann using mitochondrial DNA, which is maternal side DNA. The 3 female hairs that were found on 2 of the victims were compared to DNA from 11 bottles taken from a garbage can outside of the Heuermann home, and it was consistent with Rex Heuermann's wife's DNA. And before you go thinking this is a husband and wife crime spree, police did their due diligence and were able to verify that Heuermann's wife and children were outside of the state at the times when these women were killed. In January of this year, so January of 2024, Heuermann was indicted for murder in the second degree only, so not first degree like the original 3, for Maureen Brainerd Barnes. Yesterday, in a superseding indictment, Rex Heuermann, who has remained jailed without bail this entire time, was indicted for murder in the second degree in the death of Jessica Taylor and Sandra Castilla.
So we're going to start with Jessica Taylor. Jessica Taylor was last seen in July of 2003 in New York City. And according to investigators, according to this indictment, she was a sex worker in the area of Midtown Manhattan. On July 21st, 2003, Jessica had a phone conversation with her mother and said, "Hey, your birthday's coming up. I'm going to come over to your house in a few days." And mom's like, "Okay, great." Then a few days later, when her mother was expecting a visit, Jessica never showed up, and her mother, Mrs. Taylor, immediately notified law enforcement.
According to the indictment, on July 26, 2003, an individual was walking their dog just west of Halsey Manor Road in Manorville, which was in Suffolk County, where Gilgo Beach is. At the time, the witness had seen what they thought to be human remains, and that's why they called 911. Now, upon arrival, members of the Suffolk County Police Department were able to determine that the remains were that of a female who they were able to later identify as Jessica Taylor. She'd been found lying on her back with her legs bent beneath her, and notably, she was decapitated and both of her arms had been severed from her body below her elbows. A tattoo on her torso had also been obliterated by a sharp object, so clearly the killer is trying to make it so they can't identify this person easily, if at all. So during the initial investigation in 2003, Jessica's head, arms, and hands were not found. Almost 8 years later, Jessica Taylor's skull, hands, and arms were discovered along Ocean Parkway. And what's significant about this is this was on Gilgo Beach, and this was on the same road, located approximately the same distance in from the road, where the remains of the original Gilgo 4 were found. Her remains were actually, Kath, located less than a mile from where the Gilgo 4 were discovered.
At the time of Jessica's disappearance, according to the indictment, Rex Heuermann worked in the same vicinity where she was known to streetwalk as a sex worker. And they obtained records in prior search warrants that showed he was in fact present in Midtown Manhattan on July 21st, 2003, the same day she disappeared. And Kath, it doesn't say here, but I am assuming those are the phone records, the pinging that you talked about.
One of the other things the task force said in this indictment is that with the first Gilgo 4, they were able to use evidence to determine that during the times that the killings occurred, Rex Heuermann's wife and 2 children were actually out of the state on vacation. They found the same thing when Jessica Taylor disappeared and was presumed to have been killed. His wife and 2 children were actually in Vermont, and he was alone for an entire week from July 20th to July 27th.
Just a couple other things about Jessica's case. There was a witness, and again, the indictment doesn't identify who these witnesses were, but they had a witness who put a 2002 dark-colored Chevrolet Avalanche at around the location where Jessica's remains were found.
And the Avalanche plays a big part in the first bonus episode that we mentioned, because that was an identifying feature in a lot of the different locations where these women were taken.
Exactly. And Rex Heuermann had a Chevy Avalanche. Now, Jessica was found in 2011, and the second piece of evidence that stands out to Kathy and I is that on her body, there was a human hair recovered. It was stuck to a piece of what the indictment calls surgical drape that had been underneath Jessica's body. According to the indictment, the piece of hair was not suitable for DNA testing at the time, but in 2023, they sent it to a lab for forensic mitochondrial analysis. And of course, over 10 years later, we have leaps and bounds in DNA analysis. That lab found that while 99.96% of the North American population can be excluded as a contributor to the male hair underneath Jessica, defendant Heuermann cannot be excluded as a contributor of the hair. 7 months after that initial DNA mitochondrial analysis, the Gilgo Homicide Task Force brought a cutting of the same hair to an independent outside lab. That lab concluded that DNA generated from the profile was likely to come from a person genetically identical to Rex Heuermann. So obviously this is significant. 2 forensic laboratories have now independently determined that the hair underneath Jessica that was stuck to the surgical drape more likely than not derived from a person genetically identical to the defendant Heuermann. And for that reason, the Gilgo Task Force believes that Rex Heuermann murdered, dismembered, decapitated, and transported the remains of Jessica Taylor to Manorville at Gilgo Beach. The victim's remains were ultimately discovered in July of 2003, and the missing body parts discovered in March of 2011.
The second woman who Rex Heuermann was indicted for murdering, there's very little known about her, except we know that she was a native of Trinidad and Tobago and had been living in New York prior to her disappearance and murder. Her name was Sandra Castilla, and her remains were found on November 20th of 1993.
I didn't read anything that suggested when she went missing.
Or even from where she went missing.
Right.
So they don't know when she was killed. But in November of 1993, 2 individuals were hunting in a wooded area of Southampton and discovered her remains. She had been 28 years old at the time, and she was found lying on her back with her arms outstretched over her head, with her uncovered legs spread apart. Her shirt had been pulled up over her torso and head, exposing her breasts, and Sandra had numerous stab injuries to her face, her torso, her breasts, her left thigh, and her vaginal area. During the course of the investigation, her body was examined by a forensic scientist, which allowed them to recover 3 hairs from her remains. One was on her right arm, which was identified as a female hair. One was tape lifted from the shirt that had been pulled above her head. This was a male hair. And then one was another tape lift off of a white shirt that had been pulled above her head. So I guess maybe she had 2 shirts on?
It sounds like it.
That was another female hair. So this is interesting. 10 years ago, so well before Rex Heuermann had been named as a suspect or indicted for any murders regarding the Gilgo Beach 4, they assumed Sandra was the victim of a different serial killer who was going through Long Island. The man's name was John Bittroff. So the hairs that had been found were sent to a forensic laboratory, and they were able to develop the unique mitochondrial DNA profiles for each of these 3 hairs. They then did a cheek swab on Bittroff and compared these to the mitochondrial DNA profiles that they had procured from Sandra Castilla. What they learned is that Bittroff was 100% excluded.
So there they are, back to square one on Sandra. The Gilgo Homicide Task Force requested new DNA testing on the hairs on Sandra Castilla. Again, the old profiles were developed in 2014. They now take the same hairs, do the DNA testing, and in February of 2024, just a few months ago, they compared the male hair to the cheek swab of defendant Heuermann, and 99.96% of North America can be excluded as the contributor, but not the defendant. And Kath, what's interesting is that with the female hair, they're like, we want to find out who this is. So what detectives knew, like this Gilgo Homicide Task Force, looking back, they knew at the time Heuermann was not married, but he was living with a woman when Sandra disappeared. So they go to her and they say, hey, do you mind contributing your DNA? They take a cheek swab from her in March. So March of 2024. On May 8th, 2024, the DNA profile comes back. And her cheek swab was consistent, like her mitochondrial DNA was consistent with the hair found on Sandra. So what does this tell us? Does this mean that this woman was involved in the murder? No, it does not. It just means that they're living together.
Her hair gets on his clothes, laundry was done together, what have you.
And is transferred to Sandra.
Right. At no time has this witness been in any way talked about as being potentially involved.
Correct. Another thing the task force did was take every DNA sample and send it to 2 labs. So this former girlfriend's cheek swab, as well as the hair found on Sandra, was analyzed at 2 labs. So in this indictment, the task force, or actually probably the prosecutor, created a chart, and it has all the victims listed, and it has hairs that were found on each of the victims. Like it describes the location. For example, on surgical drape underneath victim, on buckle of belt restraining lower body, bottom portion of burlap, that kind of thing. And they talk about the 2 tests that were done. One was a nuclear DNA test and one was a mitochondrial DNA test.
And the other interesting thing is the girlfriend from 1993 that we were talking about, how we said that her hair had been found on one of the victims, on Sandra Castilla. In these tests, in this chart that Kathy was just referencing, it also shows that some of the hairs found on the later victims were consistent with that of Heuermann's wife and or daughter.
Oh, I didn't even read that part.
But again, it's laundry being done together, it's living in the same house with each other, all of that. So again, according to the superseding indictment dated June 6, 2024, it was revealed that during the police search of the Heuermann residence after Rex Heuermann was originally arrested, it revealed an excessive amount of electronic information. One of the things they found on the hard drive of a computer that apparently Heuermann had tried to erase was what was called an HK planning document. The reason I think they call it that is that there were several notations in there and they were all by date. One was HK-2002-04. And Kath, this was strange. The way it was described in the indictment is that it was Heuermann's attempt at carrying out serial sexual murder and how to get away with it.
They refer to it as self-education and homework.
Right.
How many devices? You read it. I didn't read it. How many devices did they find in this guy's house or possession?
They found in excess of 150 electronic devices. Okay. However, when they're saying devices, I don't know if they mean flash drives. I don't know if they mean discs. I mean, who knows how broadly they're defining
device. Was it
device.
a CD? Okay.
Right, exactly.
I am assuming that those are included because who has 150 computers laying around? Who has, whatever. It's clear from the indictment that he thought he had deleted a lot of stuff that was recovered. Okay, you were talking about the HK planning document.
So in this planning document, and Kath, I'll let you get into kind of the source of it in a second, but these all had a lot of lists, right? As Kathy said, they were homework and self-education. The task force believed that all of these documents were related to 4 things. They were related to avoiding being captured on video surveillance, leaving behind any forensic evidence, what supplies he needed to purchase to ensure the first 2 were taken care of, and how to package a body for transportation to dump sites. And this included wash body inside and all cavities prior to, quote, package for transport, or avoiding a paper trail that tied him to crime scenes or what have you, which I guess he wasn't thinking about all those cell phone calls.
All the digital footprints.
Exactly. And even things, Kathy, like don't charge gas.
Right, don't use your credit card.
Exactly.
Yeah, and concerns regarding noise and...
But it was because all of this could inhibit what he referred to as playtime, and then also lessons learned. How do you improve it for the next time you do it? I mean, This is really disturbing stuff.
Horrific. They list a lot of examples in the indictment of this planning document, and we're just going to hit a couple. One of the things it says is take down/pick up. And then there's 3 bullet points. Hunt too long, seen in area too long. Remember, don't charge gas. Kathy already said that. Recon for vid cams in pickup area next time. I mean, this is a guy who wants to improve.
Well, and he's on a mission, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, this is very organized and very methodical. And so here's another example. It says body prep, and the bullet points are remove trace evidence, including fingerprints and hair. Remove trace DNA, remove ID marks, and in parentheses it says tattoos, marks, and then it says remove marks from torture, remove head and hands, package for transport. I mean, this is incredible. He's talking about a list of things he needs, like wipes and towels, drop cloths, props, toys, wooden items, all this kind of stuff.
Well, he also had lye on there to decompose the body.
Yes, LYE, lie.
Yeah. This is a man who clearly either doesn't have spell check on his computer or doesn't know how to spell in general.
Right. There are a lot of mistakes.
Like disorganized is disoriginized. Totally not kidding.
It was so bad.
Or mutilation, which we're assuming was mutilation.
Exactly. And he has notes to himself like, the more you do, the more clues you give. And then he has this note, look at the painting, what, why, who. And that is a reference to a book. So the investigators realized that the source of these notes, the inspiration for these notes, was a book by John Douglas. And you guys know who John Douglas is probably. He's famous. He's now retired from the FBI, but he was a profiler for 2.5 decades. And I think he helped started the behavioral analysis unit. Do you know? Or did he just make it famous?
I think he made it famous because remember the case that we're going to drop for you, it actually happened in 1973, which was the beginning of what became the behavioral analysis unit.
Okay, so he pretty much made it famous, and he was a guy who wrote a bunch of books, and, there's a series based on him. So John Douglas's Mindhunter book was the source of these notes that they found on Heuermann's computer or wherever they found them. And so the investigators say the established source of these notes was the Mindhunter paperback authored by John Douglas, specifically the first edition published in 1996. One of the things it says in the book, and that's why the reference is to look at the painting, it says on page 19 of the book, Douglas notes that while he was still at the FBI, he always advised his agents, quote, if you want to understand the artist, the perpetrator, you have to look at the painting, the victim. We've looked at many paintings over the years and talked extensively to the most accomplished artists. And it sounds like he's glorifying serial killers and he's diminishing victims, but he is not. So this note by Heuermann, which says, look at the painting, points to Heuermann's understanding that they're going to be looking at his victims to determine his psyche, essentially.
He's actually trying to out-profile the profilers.
100%.
Which, if his spelling is any indication, he really never stood a chance. Seriously.
But innocent until proven guilty.
That's why we're saying alleged.
Actually, it's innocent unless proven guilty.
And you got me on that a couple weeks ago where I kept saying innocent until proven guilty.
Yeah, I know, but I do the same thing,
It is
obviously.
innocent unless.
Yeah. Rex Heuermann was indicted on these new charges, so he was held over for trial. He does not have a trial date pending with respect to these new victims.
He actually doesn't have a trial date set for the other victims as well. I honestly think they are still digging, literally and figuratively, to find as many of these victims.
Sure, there's been speculation that he could be the most prolific serial killer out of New York. I mean, that's what, people are speculating.
Which, considering some of the ones that have come out of New York, that's staggering.
I know. It's like if they would say the same thing for California, that's a big deal. So kudos to the investigators for uncovering the facts necessary to hold him over on these two new victims.
And naturally, of course, Kath, the judge is continuing to keep Heuermann in jail without bail, which in New York, that's staggering too.
Right.
Apparently, you got to kill 6 people to get bail. I don't know.
Exactly. So in the days following his arrest, investigators got search warrants, as you can imagine, for his home, his backyard, all of his devices. And during these searches, they found more than 280 guns.
What does that mean? Does
I
that
don't
mean
know.
281 or 5,000?
I don't even know.
Okay.
They also found torture porn and a so-called blueprint that detectives believe he used to plan the murders. So, as Kat said, he was initially charged with 3 murders, but eventually he was also charged with the murders of Maureen Brainerd Barnes, Sandra Castilla, Jessica Taylor, and Valerie Mack. He pleaded not guilty to all 7 of the cases, and 2 years later, in September of 2025, the judge ruled, hey, by the way, we're not doing separate trials. You're going to have one trial with all 7 murder cases tried together. And I'm sure it's because of the duplicative and overlapping evidence, especially all of the testimony regarding DNA, all of the testimony that they were going to need regarding all the cell phone towers and all that kind of stuff. The judge also ruled that the defense's motion to throw away the DNA found on the pizza crust.
Throw out the DNA.
Did I say throw out?
You said throw away.
Oh. Or throw out.
Either. He could put it in the trash.
Exactly. The DNA found on the pizza crust was denied. Denied. Anyway, so the case was expected to go to trial September of 2026, and prosecutors estimated that they would have been calling more than 100 witnesses.
And they were all going to be tech people. You know that.
Yeah, but remember some of these women who had friends who observed things that were really, really critical. Anyway, Rex Heuermann made a stunning reversal, as Kathy said, and admitted in open court that he was guilty of not only the 7 murders that he was charged with, but an eighth murder as well. He said he was responsible for intentionally causing the death of Karen Vergata back in 1996.
And she was part of the remains that were found later when, remember, they found an additional 6 remains after the Gilgo 4. She was identified through those remains.
So in court, he admitted to meeting all 8 women, strangling them, and leaving their bodies where they were found across Gilgo Beach, Manorville, and Southampton.
So the victims he admitted to killing were Melissa Bartholomew, who was 24 years old, Megan Waterman, who was 22, Amber Costello, who was 27, Maureen Brainerd Barnes, who was 25, Jessica Taylor, who was 20, Sandra Castilla, who was 28, Valerie Mack was 24, and Karen Vergata was 34. And their loved ones sat in the courtroom as the district attorney asked Heuermann about what he did to each woman individually. So basically, Kathy, he would say this to Heuermann: Melissa Bartholomew, did you kill her? Yes. How did you kill her? Strangulation. Did you dismember her and dump her body? Yes. Did you bind her head, midsection, and legs? Yes. And it followed for the 7 that came after that. Their families had to just sit there and listen to him say yes every single time.
I cannot imagine.
I agree.
Like, if you personalize it, it's your sister and you're sitting there listening to this frickin' beast. Those poor families. And so many of those mothers and family members, like some of the sisters, like they were searching for years, like never give up.
And so, talking about that, Kath, in the gallery, like looking at these families, the grief of all of these loved ones was palpable. Some of them were like crying silently. Some were holding on to one another for comfort. And the others, Kathy, just looked lost and destroyed. As part of this plea deal, Heuermann will not be charged with Karen Vergata's murder. And this part's weird, Kath. Another part of the plea deal was that he agreed to cooperate with the FBI as part of the plea agreement. I'm assuming that's their BAU, like letting them interview him.
Oh, I'm assuming that is the case, but also how he admitted to Karen Vergata. I'm guessing. This is a guess. This is a speculation warning. But because he was charged with 7, I think that was sort of like a good faith offering. Like, yeah, I killed her too. Like, I'm admitting to these other 7, even though he tried to portray it like out of the goodness of his heart.
Yeah.
But no.
He doesn't have a heart.
Right. But I think that, or it's so screwed up, it's, you know what I mean, undiscernible at this point. Anyway, so I think that he'll tell the FBI anything they want to know. So after the court appearance, a news conference was held in the Suffolk County Police Academy gym because, of course, it was large enough to hold all the family members, the loved ones, the law enforcement, and the journalists. And so imagine a podium. On one side are all the political figures. I'm sure the mayor was there.
Yeah, maybe the governor.
Exactly. Chief of PD, da-da-da-da-da. And then on the other side were the people that mattered. You know what I mean?
The victims' families.
I'm really not trying to...
No, I agree with you.
I'm not trying to diminish, because law enforcement and the FBI did a phenomenal job once they reignited the investigation in 2022.
That task force.
Phenomenal.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Very sad sight, but also people were relieved.
But Kathy, here's the question. All the victims' families had one attorney. I want you to guess the name of a New York attorney who would swoop in and do something like this. I think you can do it. I'll give you a hint. It's a female.
Oh, I was going to guess Alan Dershowitz, even though he doesn't do this kind of thing, but I don't know.
Gloria Allred.
She practiced in LA.
Kathy, she's 112 years old.
I know. Seriously, I can't even believe that name.
Okay, I got to tell you, though, this is just my opinion. I'm not sure she's exactly 112. She might be 110. But I swear to you, in addition to copious amounts of plastic surgery, she looks like the Crypt Keeper. Allegedly. Personal opinion.
Allegedly. I mean, honestly, like back when I first passed the bar, so that's, a mere 6 months ago.
Yeah, I know. That hasn't been long at all.
Years and years ago, she was really at the height of her fame. She had a lot of good lawyers working under her. I mean, and I'm not trying to diminish what she's doing, even though I really am.
Yeah. Well, but she also spent a lot of time before cameras, and you can't be doing the legal work.
No,
and
you
do both.
can't. She had a couple phenomenal lawyers working in her firm that did all the difficult research. But yeah, you're right. She's probably 110 years old.
Yeah, something like that. I mean, she was Harvey Levin before Harvey Levin was Harvey Levin. No, but you know, with TMZ and OJ, like.
That's true. That's true. We're going to call her TMZ Allred.
Or Harvey Allred.
Harvey Allred. Okay, back to the case.
Yes.
So she was the one who was at this press conference, and she introduced the family members and allowed them to speak. Or not allowed them to speak, but...
No, you know she allowed them to speak. And Kathy, you know what struck me the most about this? The sister of victim Maureen Brainerd Barnes, her name's Melissa, she approached the podium and she actually spoke directly to her sister, who was a mother of 2 when she was murdered in 2007. Melissa had fought for years to get justice and said to her sister on this day, "I made you a promise so long ago that I would never stop searching for you. So to every family out there who are still searching, still believing, and still holding on, please do not give up hope."